Jessica Le Mesurier in the newsroom. No, today's program is not a rerun. The images we're about to show you are from this past Sunday. They are current. They're not from last month's French presidential election. Yes, this time citizens choosing not their president, but members of parliament for 5-year terms. Many heeding socialist François Hollande's call for a clear mandate with the left and its allies set to take the National Assembly from the right. Many others, though, staying away. 42%, a record for legislative elections in the first round. France's 4-round voting system, you could say, with the presidential elections followed by legislative elections. It offers other characteristics that require some explaining, like how the far right made massive inroads, garnering nearly 14% of that first-round vote, but may wind up with no seats in the next parliament. We'll ask why France seems to always have a sort of a rubber stamp parliament, it seems, and look at an election that in fact does matter an awful lot. A left-wing mandate for a brand new president. How will that weigh on the bigger battle to kickstart Europe's economy and save its common currency? Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at how France has been swinging to the left this time with a Socialist Party Senator Richard Young. Welcome back to the France 24 debate.
Hello.
His colleague from the upper chamber, Fabienne Keller, who hails from the Conservative UMP party. Journalist and author Ulrike Kolderman is with us, and so is Peter Gumbel of the French Political Science Institute Sciences Po, currently working on a new book, which is on
French elitism.
French elitism, okay. The France 24 debate, where you could always weigh in on the conversation on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at FrançoisF24, the handle there. So, France swinging left. We can look at the shift now and show you, first off, what the outgoing parliament looked like. Just a reminder there. You see in blue is the Conservative parliamentary right, elected on the heels of Nicolas Sarkozy's 2007 victory over socialist Ségolène Royal. The first round, though, from this past Sunday, definitely swinging in favor of the socialists, who in round one took the most votes. Socialists and their allies, socialists themselves running even with the UMP. The second round in 1 week's time. And according to an Ipsos Logica business consulting poll for France 24, the socialists and their allies will ride what the French like to call a pink wave to parliament, but it's unclear whether François Hollande's party will have an outright majority or need to build a coalition with the communist-backed far left and the Greens. You're looking at those numbers. Let me ask you, first of all, Richard Young, your prediction on that score. What's going to be the outcome after the second round?
Well, it's difficult to give a prediction on what will be the outcome of the number of seats, but it clearly things clearly indicate that there will be a majority. I hope the Socialist Party has 289, which is the majority by itself, but we have an agreement with the radicaux de gauche, the left.
They're called the radicals, but in fact they're not. They're more centrist.
They're not so radical.
That's confusing. Okay.
Yes. And we have an agreement with the Green Party. So anyway, I hope we will do it.
Fabienne Keller, could there be surprises?
We had the first round yesterday. We still have the second round next Sunday. So it's up to the French people to decide whether they want a one-color assembly with the Socialist Party having all powers in the National Assembly, but also, of course, the presidential position, the regions, the cities, or if they want a real debate and something more balanced. So it's up to them.
We've heard this story about having all the powers. I mean, the UMP and the various parties like the UMP, you had all powers several times in office under Chirac and previously. So I don't think it's really breaking the news. Huh?
I don't think it was the case because we had the Senate and the National Assembly, but not all the regions, all the local powers you have now, all the regions, departments and cities. So that makes you omnipotent with all the powers. I'm not sure it's good for democracy.
Let me ask Peter Gumbel to play amateur sociologist here, because they say that the French are, in fact, if you overall this whole population, that they're in fact perhaps slightly right-leaning. So why is it that the left has control of regional chambers, of a lot of of now even the Senate for the first time ever. What's happened? Why is that?
Well, if the French are indeed right-leaning, it's not by very much. And if you look at the results of these elections, it's interesting to see that the UMP and the Socialist Party are, in percentage terms, neck and neck. If you look at the presidential election outcome, François Hollande won, but it wasn't a landslide. It was, 52%. So it's a close-run thing. That's the first thing to say. I think the second thing to say is that it's nice to have a balance. There's a sort of a checks and balance system built into the French political landscape, which is perhaps difficult to manage if you're the president and you have a parliament which is the different colour, but at the same time it ensures a sort of stability. And the third thing to say is, of course, what is really strange about France is you have a presidential election and then a month later you have a parliamentary election. And so the idea that you would come in and vote a new president on the left and then suddenly say, oh, you know what, we've made a big mistake, we're going to vote on the right now. That's not going to happen. So there's a sort of a continuity in voting which is curious and
voter fatigue.
Well, and definitely voter fatigue. The high abstention rate. People got very excited about the presidential election, but then a month later to have to get excited again about a legislative election where you have perhaps, unlike Britain, you have less of a rapport with your constituency member of parliament, so you're voting again in a sort of an abstract way, a more abstract way than perhaps you need to be.
Ulrike Kollermann, when you compare with how political correspondents in Germany cover the parliament there, how important is the French parliament? Is it just a rubber stamp institution?
Well, one big example is like foreign missions, like in Afghanistan. In Germany, the parliament has a lot to say, and it's very important, and they have a power to decide. In France, the parliament can discuss it, but only after it happened, and then they discuss it, and they don't even vote. So that's one big difference between the German parliament and the French parliament. But still, the elections are important.
And when you see that, again, the far right has nearly 14% of the vote and may get no seats in parliament. Of course, that would be impossible in Germany because you have proportional representation.
That's very difficult to explain to German readers because they can't understand that there is a party who's got 13% and then they don't have a single seat or maybe one. It doesn't really make sense, and Marine Le Pen called it undemocratic, and maybe that's right because they got a lot of votes and they probably need some representation.
Richard Jung, do you agree?
Let me just come back on one thing, that the German parliament has much more power than the French parliament, I must say, in all budgetary, fiscal issues, as you mentioned, international affairs. The Bundestag meets, discusses and votes. The French parliament is always running after the government and saying, hey, I exist, please take notice of me. So that's one thing. On why the regions and the départements have been, or are still, mostly, not only left-wing. I think one reason is that Mr. Sarkozy tried a disastrous reform of local power, of local fiscal policy, and this created really havoc throughout the country, and all the mayors and so even centre, even right-wing, were utterly shocked by this reform, and it was a big balance in the country.
On the campaign trail, though, there was the question of whether or not there should be a dose of proportional representation.
Yes.
Is it fair that the National Front could have no seats in the next parliament?
I think, the German example is a good one, where they have two votes, one for the constituency and one which is in fact proportional, which goes to national. We should move into that direction, but let me say that I will not cry too much that we don't have 13% of MPs coming from the Front National.
Fabienne Keller?
The system of election for the Assemblée nationale is a majority system, and the Front National is an extreme right party. So they are not able to have any allies, so they are not able to discuss, like the Green, who are making a much lower percentage, and discussing with the Socialist
But they
Party and
have
having
an
some
ally.
constituency. Yes, of course.
Voilà.
So that's the explanation. I am not sure it's a good idea they would come in. I was elected at the Regional Council in Alsace when we had a fully proportional system. It was very difficult to manage because it was hard to get a majority because nobody had the majority to manage. And there is a lot of money in our regions. And there were so many that they were able to really destabilize the assembly. So, when you give totally proportion, you give a lot of power to the ones that bring the last votes. So the question of the balance, like in the German system, between a direct system and a portion of proportional, so that everybody feels he's represented, is open, but not for the National Assembly.
Yeah, I think what's interesting though is if you have a system like you do currently in France, where you can win 14% of the vote but have perhaps 0 seats, for a party like the Front National, that is very good propaganda material that just shows that they are marginalized by the mainstream and victimized, which is the position they want to be in, so they can be out there. If they were part of Parliament, they would have to be more responsible, and they would probably have to tone down they would have to take decisions which they would have to then be able to justify, and so maybe they would become less extreme. So in some ways, actually, it plays in their favour that they're not going to get seats in Parliament in the same proportion as they're winning votes.
In the press conference she gave a short while ago, the head of the National Front, Marine Le Pen, said that her party would maintain most, but not all, of its 32 candidates who've made the cut to the second round. In districts where the far right didn't make the cut, she then went on to read a specific list of names of candidates she wanted out, 4 of them from the UMP party, 2 from the Socialists, and she gave even a very special mention for Nicolas Sarkozy's campaign manager.
Concernant le cas spécifique de
Madame Nathalie Kosciusko-Morizet clearly stated that between a national front and a socialist candidate, she would have no problem voting for the socialist candidate. So we're asking our voters to show the same courtesy to Madame Kosciusko-Morizet and vote for the socialist candidate.
Fabienne Keller, is that going to wreak havoc this time around, the National Front?
Is it
going to make a lot of trouble for the conservative UMP party, the National Front? You heard the tone of what she was saying.
Oh yes, very, very hard. Like she's only making theater when she smiles. We can see the real Marine Le Pen here, talking about a legitimate candidate, Nathalie Kosciusko-Morizet, who did a lot of wonderful work in the environment sector. So the position of the UMP is clear. No discussion with the National Front. It's impossible to discuss with such a leader. And that's it.
And the head of your party has denounced one of the candidates, the UMP's Roland Chassin, who this Monday announced he was withdrawing his own candidacy in the south of France to make way for a National Front candidate.
It's only personal position, and the party does not accept his decision.
On the eve of the voting, though, one poll came out showing that 2/3 of conservative voters would like to see pacts between the UMP and the National Front. We're calling up the numbers there. 2/3 of conservative voters had said that, according to that poll. What's it like when you've been speaking to your constituents?
First of all, we should not always believe and follow the polls. And second thing, it's a question of responsibility. We just had a session this afternoon, the political bureau of the UMP party, and we clearly reconfirmed this decision. No alliance, no discussion with the leaders of the National Front. Of course, like the Socialist Party proposed. We discussed with the people who are voting because they are desperate, because they are in very difficult situation, because they feel they are not represented at the national level.
This makes all sides uncomfortable, doesn't it? When Marine Le Pen calls for her electorate to vote for a socialist candidate.
Sure, but we don't ask her electorate to vote for us. That's the difference. And usually you have about 10-15% of the Front National voters who go towards, on the second round, towards the socialists, 50% go towards the UMP. This was the case for the presidential election. I don't know if this will be the case this time. But let me say something to Madame Keller. There is something which hurts me, at least, and that is in the position of the UMP. It is this so-called neither. When there is a vote between a Front National and a socialist on the second round, the UMP will just withdraw and call for neither. This means that they put the Socialist Party at the same level as the Front National. And I think this is not correct. We have Republican values. We might diverge on many points, but we have common values. And we call to support the UMP candidate when it is a second round between the UMP and the Front National. We clearly ask to beat the Front National. You don't do that. And that is, I think, a mistake.
Fabienne Keller?
First of all, there is a very mathematical situation, which is there are you have 20 situations where the PS is against the Front National, whereas, we don't have the same interest in taking that position. And this is why Mrs. Aubry took that position. Yesterday night.
Madame.
Only yesterday night when she had counted how many she could gain versus how many she would lose. Secondly, we made that position very clearly, all of us, in the UMP political bureau this afternoon. The position is not symmetric. Against the FN, there is no possible discussion, no way that we want to start something with them, given the fact they are not Republican, they are not respecting the French Republic. Secondly, we are talking about the situation where there is one Front National and one socialist, right? Secondly, what do we do towards the socialists? We are not sharing, we are two democratic parties. We are not sharing your views on the budget, on the retirement scheme, on other big issues. So we are not going to support the person who is representing the Socialist Party. But the situation is not symmetric.
Yes,
it's
but then
not
it
at
means
all
you
for
put
the
the Front
same
National
reasons.
at the same level of the Socialists. And
No.
I think that is not acceptable.
Ulrike Kollermann, quickly for the break.
How do you explain then that someone like an ex-minister of Sarkozy, Nadine Morano, appealed to the Front National voters and said, we share the same values?
And we'll get the answer to that when we come back, so we can give the answer.
My understanding
in full.
is that it's a very personal position due to the very situation she has where she is. I do not share
you don't
such
share that
a
point of
position.
view. When we come back, we'll pick up on that point. Stay with us. It's the France 24 debate.